personally a 27-year member of the House Judiciary Committee. I've been involved in writing and rewriting the Voting Rights Act on more than one occasion. One occasion was where a Democratic House and Senate passed the bill with Republicans when it was in the mid-2000s and signed by Republican President George W. Bush with great support. 98 votes in the Senate, over 400 votes in the House. Where are we now? Democracy is on the precipice of disaster because we have developed an aversion to democracy. We don't know how to save our democracy. And the way to save our democracy is to ensure that we have a voting rights law, the John Robert Lewis Voter Enhancement and the Freedom to Vote, that takes away all of the poison pills that have been passed by state legislators directed by Donald Trump after his resounding loss in 2020, of which he declared a victory, a sinful victory, after we had the largest voter turnout and largest vote for a president in the history of the United States, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. None too short to acknowledge. They got the largest number of votes in the history of the United States. A gentleman from Delaware and a woman of color from California, because America wanted to preserve democracy. And yet, a few months before they were sworn in, a few days before they were sworn in, a horrific insurrection took place to attack, divide the nation, to attack the House of Representatives, the first such insurrection by Americans against Americans and against the citadel of democracy since the Civil War. And even the Civil War had some understanding of the value of the institutions of government. They had the Confederacy and they had the Union. However you disagreed because of slavery, the heinous and sinful act, at least, believe it or not, one could say that there was government. In this instance, they sought to destroy government. And so, languishing and delaying the voting of the Voting Rights Act is unacceptable. So I call for an immediate response of commitment to vote for the John Robert Lewis bill and, of course, the Freedom to Vote Act by Senator Manchin immediately. And I also call for the immediate lifting of the filibuster that is not constitutional. It is not a law. It is only a rule. It is a fixture. It is one of convenience. It's one of destruction. It is utilized to block all of us from what proves to be what is best for all of America. In the 1900s, it was used to block civil rights laws. And so it is crucial for us to begin to do so. Let me thank Majority Leader Schumer, who has insisted that they will vote on it in early January. It is my desire that it might be earlier because the necessity is so much. We need to do it earlier. I'm willing to return back to Washington. I call on my colleagues to return back to Washington. We've got to get this done now. We have no time to rest or no time to wait. And so I am calling for the immediate passage of the Voting Rights Act. I have introduced a op-ed, an opinion piece to be sent to many people, and it is based upon the issue of the Shelby case, which destroyed Section 5. And Section 5 would have protected us against SB 7.
That's right.
It would have protected us against the redistricting plan, the plan that's in Georgia that has written out Lucy McBath, a member of Congress, an African-American woman, written out of her seat, and they are trying to write out members of color that they can't vote out, but they're trying to write them out. We need to protect the fragility of democracy, the preciousness of democracy. We are unique as the oldest democracy, and it is not a perfect system, but it allows voices to be heard. I believe that the greatest opportunity is to let your voice be heard at the ballot box, unfettered, unthreatened, undiminished, and we must stop what is going on now. And in 2022, Lloyd Parker, Representative Reynolds, we need in the state of Texas, the home of Barbara Jordan, LBJ, when the Voting Rights Act was first written and Barbara Jordan wrote the language to admit Texas on language minorities. And we have needed that bill ever since. It is the very essence of the 18th Congressional District. We are standing in a voting rights district. I do not have a district that has been sufficiently written by state legislatures. They are written by courts. We must do that where we can actually have the legislature write plans that allow the people of Texas to select a person of their choosing. Let me now, one of the heroes of trying to stop SB 7, left for Washington. I never use the term fled. He did not flee. He left with his dignity and his purpose and his knowledge to Washington. We were all over Washington, meeting with the president, the vice president, meeting with the senators and congresspeople, Speaker of the House. Story in Texas was the engine of the commitment of the Judiciary Committee and move this bill quickly. Representative Ron Reynolds.
Thank you, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. And let me just say, first of all, that I'm so honored to stand here on this podium with Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee and Deloitte Parker. This is personal to me, just like with Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, having sat and currently sitting in the seat that was once held by the great Barbara Jordan. I'm the first African-American elected state representative in Fort Bend County since Reconstruction. But I realized I didn't get here by myself. I realized if it wasn't for the Voting Rights Act of 1965, that there would be no Ron Reynolds state representative. But because before that, they had whites-only primaries in Fort Bend. There was a time when we all should reflect on this, that they had poll taxes and literacy tests. They had Jim Crow laws that prevented people of color from voting. It wasn't that long ago. Again, we're talking about the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So it wasn't ancient history. This is recent history. And Texas was one of the worst states. And that's why Texas, based on the Voting Rights Act, was one of the states that needed preclearance. Well, guess what happened since the Shelby case? Texas has been found by courts to have intentionally discriminated against minorities on every redistricting since then. But we don't have the voting rights protections now based on the Shelby case. So what you see in Senate Bill 7 that Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee talked about, it allowed the Texas legislature, until we fought and did everything we could, it allowed them to pair Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee and Congressman Al Green, because of those protections weren't there. So it allowed them to basically discriminate based on race to historically African-American districts. And so what we're telling you is this: if the federal government, the U.S. Senate, doesn't pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the Freedom to Vote Act, we're going to see black and brown minorities disenfranchised like we haven't seen since the 1960s. We're talking about Jim Crow 2.0. And this is all based on the big lie of voter fraud by former President Donald Trump. He lost because the American people turned out in record numbers and voted for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. That is the reason why he lost. And so we're here today urging Congress to do the right thing, to be on the right side of history, to get rid of the filibuster, if nothing else, a carve out, so that we can pass this fundamental legislation. This is America. Voting is the most fundamental right that we have as Americans. Everything else, so goes voting, so goes everything. You talk about infrastructure, voting is the infrastructure of our democracy. So if we can't have and protect the freedom to vote, then we're going to have anarchy. It's going to be chaos. So what I'm asking people to do is to urge the U.S. Senate to do the right thing,
now,
to take this up now. We can't wait. This cannot wait. And so, Congresswoman, I want to publicly thank you for your leadership in helping get this federal legislation passed. We were there because of you when that historic bill was passed in the House by Speaker Pelosi and the Congressional Black Caucus. We had hearings in the Judiciary Committee to tell our Texas story about the fact that black and browns are the majority in Texas. And when we did redistricting, 95% of the growth over the past decade was because of black, brown, and Asians. And yet no African American or minority opportunity districts were created through redistricting. Let me repeat that again last time. 95% of the growth in the state, the most diverse state in the country, was because of black, brown, and Asians. Yet and still, when we did redistricting, those new seats didn't reflect that growth. So we have to fight for this protection. We know we stand on the shoulders of John Lewis and others who made good trouble, Fannie Lou Hamer, and so many other people whose names are not listed in the history books. They fought, they bled, they died for this right to vote. We need it now. God bless you, and thank you, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. We need this legislation.
Thank you so very much. Shape Community Center has been on the battlefield through the life of Barbara Jordan, Mickey Leland, Craig Washington, and I'm honored now. They've seen history, and they know. Deloitte knows. He was at the University of Houston, one of the activist students. He knows what it was like when we didn't have the right to select a person of our choosing. It wasn't until 1972 that Barbara Jordan was able to get elected after the census and the passage of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. We live every day what voting rights means in the South. We did not have the opportunity to elect a person of our choosing. We didn't have an Adam Clayton Powell.
That's right.
And even across America, it was skimpy. One in Chicago maybe, one in California, one in New York. We rarely had any numbers of people of color. One down here with Henry B. Gonzalez. We didn't have these people because we were spread out, we were scattered, we were intimidated, we were counting jelly beans and just couldn't get anything happening until that 1965 Voting Rights Act. And I can assure you, as Representative Reynolds said, there are unknown soldiers who died, unnamed who marched, unnamed who lost their life in the battle. One that we probably wouldn't even know, Jimmy Lee Jackson, lost his life. So I know that I cannot be silent. The Voting Rights Act, both of them, Freedom to Vote, Voting Rights Act, must be passed. Deloitte Parker, he knows it in real time.
I wonder if we really recognize or understand the power of young people in this process. The power of young people could take us all the way to victory. I say that because a couple of weeks ago, Elder Rose Sanders came to Shape Center. She was the wife of Senator Sanders, the first black senator in Selma. And she came to Shape as an elder, and she met with the children and told them how important it is and how important it was for them to stand up and encourage their parents to speak out, encourage their parents to vote, encourage their parents to participate in the process. So I say, on behalf of in the Edmund Pettus Bridge, every year our children at Shape Community Center march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in memory of John Lewis. We do that every year for the last 30 years. We've done that. And when they march, they learn. They know the story of John Lewis and the price that he paid. So we say to you, stand up, speak out, but equally as important, educate our children so they will understand the importance of it. Because they are coming behind us. But right now, we want to deal with those who are coming on the side of us and march with them and walk with them. So brothers and sisters, join us and do the right thing, okay?
All right.
Deloitte, thank you. Representative Reynolds, thank you. Let me give something real. Right behind us are people getting vaccinated in the 18th Congressional District. We have a district. It's a district where people of color can vote for a person of choosing, and all people can. But because of the resources that, as a member of the United States Congress, a woman of color, you've got vaccinations and testing right here in the 18th Congressional District for free, and we've done that now for 2 years almost.
Yes.
Because that's what representation is about. And that's what did not happen before we had the ability under the 1965 Voting Rights Act to get a Mickey Leland, to get a Barbara Jordan, a Craig Washington, Sheila Jackson Lee, that would focus on all people, but would focus on the issues of people of color as well. We're not ashamed of that. We're not exclusive, we're inclusive.
Yes.
But we were exclusive before the Voting Rights Act. And so these people can come from far and wide, people of color and others, to 3611 Ennis to get vaccinated today, December 21st, from 1 to 5. Why? Because there's representation. And that's what I'm frightened about. That SB 7 will do. That it will continue to intimidate. And when we go into the ballot box in 2022, seniors will be confused. Young people will be confused. It will be like the sign says, no room for you here. Not wanted. Don't walk in. Don't come to vote. They've tried every way, eliminating straight ticket voting. There was nothing illegal about that. But for the people who were seniors and those who were disabled, if they wanted to do so, and children or plain old folk wanted to vote straight ticket for a Democrat or Republican, what's wrong with that? What was wrong with it is people were seeing that there was a victory on one side and there was losing on the other side. That's an attack on democracy. That's telling you, let me put a knife in democracy, because when I see people expressing themselves and it's going one way, I got to find a way to cut their head off by legislation and laws that will stop people from voting. I can't for the life of me understand, after having counted jelly beans, as John Robert Lewis used to say to us all the time, and recite the Constitution, which today there are those who went to the Capitol on January 6th, and I would challenge if any of them could recite the Constitution. I know that I read it very well, and I encourage others, because the opening says that we have come together to create a more perfect union. And though it was not perfect with the institution of slavery, by any means, the heinous acts of slavery, the sin of slavery, we do have these democratic ideals that we could continue to heal and grow. Democracy has allowed H.R. 40 to go as far as it has gone in the United States Congress, the Commission to Study Slavery and develop reparation proposals. So democracy is a process that opens the doors for all to speak and be heard. I am very grateful to Lloyd Parker for his service, and he's right. Let your children cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Go to Selma, as I've crossed it for some 20 years with John Lewis. And you're right, Representative Reynolds. We must realize that we must be educated, and we must understand what not having this legislation does to you and your leadership and the leadership of this state. And people must be able to choose a person of their choosing. The history of our nation and our people and the diversity is embedded in all of us. This is what we must lead with. So,
let me point. SB 7, just like we're sitting here today, people are able to come through and drive through safely and get vaccinated. We're in the heat of a pandemic. Well, because of that legislation, no longer will they be able to vote at a polling booth through drive-through vote. That we've eliminated mobile voting, we've eliminated drive-through voting, we've eliminated 24-hour voting, we've empowered partisan poll watchers so people like the Proud Boys can come into 3rd Ward, Deloitte, and try to intimidate people to discourage them from voting. That is all forms of voter suppression, and that is what this bill did. That is why we need this legislation. There's no reason. We don't know what it's going to be like when we go back to vote. What kind of pandemic? No one saw the Omicron variant. We could have who knows what. We could be, but voting, if people don't feel safe, guess what? They may not want to go vote. So why are we eliminating drive-through voting other than many minorities, many people in urban areas took advantage of it, and they want to eliminate it, and that is voter suppression. I just wanted to point that out.
It is voter suppression, but they eliminated doctors, nurses who were fatigued with COVID-19, working night shifts, working evening shifts, coming with their last breath almost to make sure they were heard, because they wanted to make sure that people who understood science were leading as opposed to the science deniers. They wanted the people who understood science, and they made sure that those individuals could vote. And there was found by the Secretary of State that was a Republican for the state of Texas, not one iota, very minuscule, any issues of fraud. Nothing happened except the goodness of people exercising their constitutional rights, the right to vote under the 15th Amendment, and of course their right to vote as a citizen. That's all that happened here. And so listen to our voices. Deloitte Parker, thank you so very much. The founder and leader of Shape Community Center, one of the renowned national social justice agencies in America, and as well Representative Ron Reynolds, to the incoming head of the State Black Legislators Caucus, and one person who lived and breathed why we need the Voting Rights Act, John Lewis, Vote Enhancement Act, and the freedom to vote. We're at 3611 Ennis. I'm going to say it again. Only because you've got the 18th Congressional District. We're in the 3rd Ward. Resources are being brought here. You were able to vote so that I would know in my accountability to you that we needed to make this available to you. Thank you to Diamonds in the Dust. And we're going back to be with our law enforcement who are giving out toys. And so we'll hope that you keep coming, keep coming, keep coming, keep coming, keep coming. Keep coming, keep coming, keep coming. And we want to make a presentation. If you see us doing a lot of things, banging on things, you know that this is really a family affair. But let me thank Diamonds in the Dust, the 2021 Holiday Food and Aid Drive. I thank them for their leadership and thank them for partnering with me. And we are so happy to see all of the people that are being vaccinated and tested. Whole families are coming. But it says in conclusion that they are deserving of the respect, admiration, and commendation of the United States Congress. You truly are. And it's signed Sheila Jackson Lee, Member of Congress.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much. Thank you.